All right, Hugh doesn't want to do a podcast, so
Oh, you don't?
we can still record though.
Let's do a short. We'd like to make some comments about where we were at. And who knows? Maybe we'll just keep talking. It'll be good.
Well, that's what I was hoping for. I mean, especially, the last one we recorded was kind of like before you went talking about denominational challenges and obstacles and so I was like gonna, just ask like how to go and how those hypotheses play out. Like,
All right. Well, let's go ahead then. You just fire away.
well, tell me about it. I mean, tell me about, yeah, just like paint the picture a little bit. Where were you?
Yeah,
Who
we
was
were
there?
down at, we will name no names today. We will just share what it was. But it was a very large gathering of denominational leaders in America. And they were all convening. There's been a network for years that kind of convenes these leaders, and they do I think they do three events a year together. And so we were the cleanup talk. Had a hour at the very end, and then it was over. But great people, a lot of people that have been serving the church for a long time. So it was good to see old friends and whatever.
I thought it went really good.
Why?
Yeah, why?
Well, I think that
And we were presenting the Brave Cities thing just for people that are listening. We were presenting sort of our way amidst other people presenting their thing.
yeah. Well, for a few reasons. One, I think I have to frame it this way because this was uh this was helpful for me to find optimism or hope rather in the experience. 14 years ago, I know specifically of a couple of people that were in the actual room that would have um, kind of face to face said, "We feel like you guys are abandoning Christian ethics or Christian orthodoxy or
Based on what you were doing in
based on
Birmingham.
what we were trying to do or really starting to uncover or experiment with 14 years ago." The part that we don't talk about a lot in this pathway is that we do kind of think that we are in the last days of the prevailing model of church as we know it. And so,
And even based on our time there, it seems like most denominational leaders would probably agree with that. I don't think there'd be a lot that would go, no,
yeah.
you guys are so off. We're going to
No,
be
so
around
that's
forever.
that's my point is like within the first 2 hours, John, I'm hearing some pretty big named guys saying with there's no pride in this thought. So there's this hard to deliver it without sounding like told you so, but saying what we were saying 14 years ago, verbatim,
Yeah.
like this is where we see the church going now. The problem with what you see is it's typically not revelation, it's just deduction. It's like now that we've been watching, we're deducing.
Yeah.
But the reality is some people were being revealed this stuff 15, 20, 30 years ago and began laying some groundwork. And I do feel like that. Like we would say that we mostly feel like failures in our effort of laying groundwork
Yeah,
for
it feels more
kingdom
like we
ecosystem.
seeded an idea is
Yeah.
what it feels like.
And it's funny now, like just kind of watching it play out or watching different things play out. I do wonder how people feel, especially in the ministry paradigm or the Christian ethic, because your work, you're not supposed to be rewarded this side of eternity for your work a ton. Like it's kind of a life of anonymity and confusion and is this really
Right.
real? But I know so many stories throughout history of people, men and women who have kind of given their life to something that really didn't bear much fruit until they died,
Yeah.
or even generations after they died. And then we kind of harken back to their story and like, well,
They might have
you
been
know,
on to something. Yeah.
right. Anyway, I
Yeah. By the
think
way, I had that same emotional feeling like looking at their faces while we were talking because in like, and this is so silly to even say this, but back when we were doing Tangible Kingdom, which was just literally all we were saying was you should be like a missionary in your neighborhood and, do missional community. And early days, people looked like they looked on this event to me. There was some faces that were smiling and like, oh, this is so refreshing. And then there was a lot of people more like, really? Like, you think this is what we ought to do? So I don't
so.
know. I
So
feel
even the
like
idea, John, of like kingdom ecosystem, I still think is such a um. I don't know that we've done the best job of being able to communicate it to the average listener. Because do you remember when we were where were we together? Kansas City, we were together, right? Weren't you
Yep.
there?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember the energy in the room when we were talking about church as kingdom ecosystem and life as kingdom movement?
Yeah, that's the talk we shared on the podcast as like the
Right,
Brave Cities
right.
primer.
Yeah, so I leave there going, okay, maybe we're getting better, specifically me, at actually like bringing this down to just a conversation and not some kind of ethereal, prophetic. I'm pissed all the time because I don't feel that way at all. I feel like, hey, let's really think about this. We always feel like Hugh and John and I always feel like the you know, one of the primary threads of our message is liberation. We want to be liberated, and we want to help liberate others to live a missional, vibrant, life free from the burdens of evangelicalism.
Mhm.
I guess I don't know if that's the right identifier. There's things I love about evangelicalism, just the metrics and the pain of never fulfilling the promise, and then the thing that Hugh said, and you
Well,
can
time out. Save that for a minute because I want to stop on that. So we were in a little chunk of the subject matter where they were addressing how they frame it. It was kind of like new forms of church.
yep,
So we were supposed to share new forms of church,
alternative.
alternative forms of church. So we weren't sinning against the gathering by telling our crazy story. They
That's
wanted
what they
us to.
asked for.
But prior to us, and again, no, this hopefully this doesn't come across negative at all. But there was, and I'll just kind of frame, there was one network that has done a really good job drawing some great non-white leaders, like in a big city, and they've got them to quit jobs, full-time jobs, and to move down into very, rough areas of these cities. And but when they share what they're doing, it's kind of like old school Azusa revival stuff. Like we're on the streets, we're in neighborhoods, we're working with gang members, and it was almost entirely about getting people saved.
Well, and
Okay.
getting them to a gathering.
Yeah, and they gathered differently, gathered in neighborhoods, at parks, whatever. But it was primarily about being able to gather people, talk to them about God, and
Centered
see
around a
them.
leader, a
Yep,
single leader.
yep. And then the next one was a person that's doing more of an online deal in a large metropolitan area for kind of young professionals and very creative. On the evangelistic front, really being contextual. I thought it was definitely an alternative form, but it was still related to getting people together that are lonely and helping find community and over time teaching them things about Jesus and
The
um
next one was gathering people in houses very, very simply
yep,
and just doing kind of a Sunday
yep,
model in a house, like
yep,
Bible study, and then let's go and live out
yep.
our faith.
And then the other one that was right before us was a launch large model based on college campuses where they're trying to go to and have this happen in 400 of the largest universities. And their average financing of that was, they said, about 3 million per launch large. So I just did the math on 400 times 3 million. I don't know what this means, but it's 1.2
billion.
E9. So 1.2 billion. And again, you get the sense of vibrant worship gatherings, college kids, probably a great feel, but still it was about getting people saved and probably finding community. And they were very pro, like, hey, we're only going to have these kids for 4 years, so so they viewed it as potentially a missionary training, sending type of a scenario. All of them I thought were fantastic, and the stories were great. And then knuckleheads come up at the
Us,
end.
we're the knuckleheads.
We're the knuckleheads,
Easy to put together.
and we're for us, it was just weird because all of their models were still about communicating the spoken gospel to people in gatherings. And I don't know, it just felt weird to me, like we were once again either wrong or it's 30 years out, is how I kind of feel. Like we were presenting an idea that was very inspirational and curious to them, but not where they would go, oh, I think we'll just, hey, let's not do the $1 billion thing. Let's do this thing. And then I wake up this morning kind of driving to town, and it's just a weird feeling because you go, what we're doing is so small compared to some of these.
So here's where be preparing, John. I'm passing the ball to you with this. The idea is if the church as we know it is going to continue for, let's say, 750 more years, and then some kind of, depending on your eschatology, some kind of return happens. This age ends. Jesus comes back for his bride or whatever. Then I still would say I want to sow this message. Like, I want the church to function as a kingdom ecosystem. I think and it can and borderline should, and it will be a beautiful thing in every city. But if things don't change, then I go, do we even keep, what's the point? Like, I do feel like we're foretelling where things are going. Things seem to be almost inevitably moving away from a large gathering, leader centric, come in here and grow in your faith so that maybe you can make it through another week and come back next week. Give money so that we can fund this. In 2010, I'll bookend with the same thought that I started with. That was the thought in 2010. Like, I think God is saying that this time is ending, and we want to build or architect or help establish these art communities, these brave cities, these kingdom ecosystems that will be cities of refuge for people of faith and people that are hurting and lost and lonely to find a place at the table.
Okay, but I think if those other entities that were planting those forms heard that, they would go, we're just doing that. We've created the space for all these young professionals in this town to find community, and they volunteer and they help. They learn to like care for people. I think even the collegiate ministry would go, yeah, we're teaching Jesus. And so maybe thousands of those kids will pick up on that. And so I don't know if we have a clean way. Maybe it is that we just haven't communicated it well. But some of them might even say, well, we also create kingdom ecosystem. It's just not like what y'all are saying. So I don't know. It was some ways I was encouraged. Just there is a lot of innovation going on out there, but my question, is it only about getting people to listen to our message of Jesus, or is it really a call for people to go deeper than that? So, all
Man,
right. So with that, what do you got, bro? Can
well,
you help us? Like, we need counseling.
I don't know how much I can help, but there's some words that stood out to me that I want to like name. So you said it was like new forms of church. And so you're like, so these different people get up to talk about a network or online thing with young professionals. And so there's these different forms you're calling them. And then Taylor said, like, I want to see this function as kingdom ecosystem. And Hugh, I think to your point, like some may go, we think this form is functionally doing that. And maybe, I mean, I don't know that any one particular manifestation of
Totally.
kingdom ecosystem, right? So,
Yep.
as you were running through the forms, maybe this word wasn't said, but the word that was in my mind as you were talking about, I was like, because you were saying, well, it's still about gathering people, getting people together to hear our message. So what stood out to me, the word in my mind was context. So I was like, is a new context a new form? It's just an interesting question. I don't know if we can like tease these apart or if this is even helpful, but you're like, so we go into neighborhoods or we do it. So you're like, they did it in the house, but it's basically the same thing we would have done in the chapel, but we're doing it in the house. And maybe it's on a different day of the week. But the form actually sounds consistent.
Hmm.
That's even what I'm hearing, and I'm just curious about that. I'll pause
Hmm.
there if you guys want to respond to that because I have a few thoughts. But
Well, and again, the felt need of these missionaries, and I think they were all good examples of really good missionaries. They still are trying to. I mean, I think they would say the highest form of life that we can do as a missionary is to somehow try to help people to even want to hear this message of Jesus. Okay, so that is a felt need right now. We go, okay, our street cred sucks in the world. We know they ain't coming to a Sunday thing, but
mm-hmm.
they might come to our thing in the park down in this part of, the Bronx,
Totally.
whatever. And so they're trying to innovate in some personal way, something unique to where these people will finally go, I'll listen to what you're saying. And I do like that as an evangelistic heart. I love anytime we can do anything human to human where people go, hey, I'd love to hear what you have to say. And I like you. I trust your family. So I love that part. Um, but I just still feel like if the only emerging church trends are to figure out how to get people to listen to us, I just feel like it's not just barely lacking, it's lacking so much.
Here's kind of what it feels like too, John. It's like um, if we recognize that in our within our reach, all the families that we see around us, or really, let's just say it's an epidemic. They're falling apart. There's no connection. Marriages are hurting terribly. Parents aren't connected to kids. Um, there's no real like life legacy story, generational passing. Like there's a poison in the well.
Mm-hmm.
And we feel like God's given us a little bit of a vision for how the family was meant to look historically, let's say biblically. Let's say like the kind of ancient narrative around the nuclear family. And so we start carrying that message. We're like, look, there's something above what we've been told. This kind of industrial revolution,
Yep.
enlightenment, checking your boxes of how to have a good family, it's not working. Now the Smiths down the road might have made it work. for whatever reason. They might say, no, we did this. We had one night a week family dinner. I prayed over my kids every night for 1 minute per kid. We had a blessing before dinner and they went to school and we're doing fine. But as a general rule, every year the family is crumbling more and more. Why would we keep having conferences saying we want to do exactly what we've been doing, but with a little more flair? So when we do our family dinners now, we're actually having Kobe beef.
We put up decorations.
We're putting up decorations. We're not doing our family dinner in the living room, in the dining room anymore. We've moved it to the living room. Right. Still on Thursday nights. Some families got super progressive and moved it to Tuesday nights.
But this is actually what I was asking. I mean, I think you're answering my question, but like, this is what I'm saying is like, what I'm hearing is that like and I'm trying to think of a parallel because I think this maps in so many ways in like other parts of our life where it's like we do the thing we've always done, but we do it thinking we're doing something different in a new place, you know, like
right. So this is my point, and then take it. And then someone comes along, which many people have throughout the years, and they say, hey, what would be your dream? What would just move work, money, everything else aside? What would be your dream? And they say, my dream would just to be deeply connected to my children, to like see them and know that we are in this together, and my spouse, like we get to dream together, we're strategizing, we're walking as a family, and then my children's children, and then my great grandchildren, like we're working on a story together. It's not some kind of compartmentalized. And we said, well, could we tell you that that's a possibility? But your whole paradigm has to shift. You've been living life in this segmented routine where you do family as a thing, as a box, but then you work, and then you have like your kind of social life, and it's all a different box. And you've read books that told you how to balance your work, family life, and spiritual rhythms as boxes. And we're going, for the past 20 years, we decided to merge everything as one movement. It's called an ecosystem, and you're all in it together. The reason you pray together is because you have friends that you want to pray for, and you have hurt in your life that you're concerned, so you just start praying. The reason you eat together is because you miss each other so much that you eat, and somehow at every meal you start remembering the good things of life. And there's some parental shepherding, but then you're going out. Like the weekends aren't a time to just veg. You're looking forward to it because you get to go, what are we doing? Like we're all together in this. And here's the last thing, and this is kind of a parallel to this experience and a lot of my experiences. But then every time you go somewhere, everyone constantly says, but the old way of doing family is okay. It's okay. We're not saying it's bad. It's a both and. We want to do the new way that they're talking about, but also don't. The weekly family dinner with the great decorations and everyone listening to dad is good. Right. And I'm going, why? So I'm not gonna harp on this anymore, but I'm going, why do we feel such a need to constantly validate something that we all are here saying didn't work, isn't working? That's what perplexes
by the way,
me.
some unique things that, like, as they were telling their stories, and by the way, like I'm not one of those guys that goes, hey, you're dropping $1 billion on your form of church, like that's a waste of money. I actually think God has so much money. Like I think he lets us do whatever we want to do. I really do. And I think he tends to fund it at some level. So it's not about that. It's not going, hey, what could you do with $1 billion in the world of church planting? I also think that there's some people that just the way that they like to live is their form. And so you can't talk them out of the way that they like to live. Some guys just love the feeling of the gathering and they love prepping for a sermon. They just love it. You can't get that out of them. And I have no problem with that either. But there were some poignant moments where I went, oh man, I wish that wasn't like, for instance, these young non-white guys are going in essentially to these barrios in this big city. There's loving on people and then gathering in parks. Well, those guys were all bivocational. So if somebody asked them, how do you fund your livelihood? And one guy just shared a really rough story. He actually quit a really good job. And he and his wife are essentially living by faith. And so it was a story of that. And I just remember thinking, oh, like,
Why'd you quit your job?
yeah, why'd you quit your job? And also, there's other ways. Like, you don't just have to, like, to live on faith isn't just to be poor and just hope somebody bails you out. Like, it's what in Brave Cities, we're actually trying to say, no, probably bivocational as you're building out your economy, as you build out your businesses. Like, you could be fully sustainable in that neighborhood the rest of your life, but let's maybe think about sustain. So that was a moment where I went, maybe he doesn't know there's a third option. Obviously the moment related to the large college ministry, the part that it wasn't so much the money that was being put in, it was the way that they train. So young leaders come in and they don't let them be like the campus pastor till they're 30. And they have reasons for doing that. They've had some bad experiences with young guys, but you could tell a lot of the inertia of the leadership training in that is to be the ultimate, like for me, that the best thing I could ever become, I'm still trying to be as a great bartender. The top of the food chain for them was a campus pastor. And I felt like, oh, I wish there was other things that would be good news to become in that network. So almost all the metrics drive towards that, their ability to plant something really big. And so that was a weird moment. It's like, wish they had higher view of what people can become if they're not a campus pastor.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. There are just some things where I went, oh, doesn't mean that form is something that we would ever poo-poo, but it still felt like, and my guess would be in that network, it's probably only men, I think. That that kind of, if that's the case, that grieves me. Like, is it still kind of some of the theological hinge points that have always kept women from being a key part of the mission of that? So,
I'm sure most of this is just our own psychological issues that we have to deal with. We probably shouldn't even post this podcast, but this is the struggle is, you know,
one old guy I think picked up on something though. There's one guy, how do you frame his question?
he said this guy was I had a couple of conversations with him and he was um he saw something different just in life in general. Like he had kind of ascended to a different level and good, sharp, successful gentleman. But he raised his hand at the end of our thing and he says, I'm curious about you guys' eschatology, not just in the future, but in the past also, because it seems like you're tapping into something that's ancient, that goes beyond our kind of understanding of the church age. And that really psyched me up.
Yeah.
Hugh rolled his eyes and was like, "Oh, here we go. Taylor's going to start talking about the Nephilim or something." But
You're like, oh no.
And we only had like 6 minutes.
but it wasn't a like this wasn't a wild-eyed, Dr. Emmett Brown from
Yeah.
Back to the Future. This was like
He was sniffing the flower.
yeah, he basically finished his thought with you guys have moved past church into kingdom. And I think that's I like how he said that. Like I want that. I want to move past the church age, maybe into the kingdom age.
So no, that's really interesting. And I think like what would you call that? So like I've always liked this move in terms of just ecclesiology, there's like this idea that like the the recognition that it's not that the church has a mission, but that the mission has a church, right?
Yes.
Like that there is like
Yes.
the mission of God in the world, which maps with
Mhm.
kingdom coming, and the church is when used properly, like a people, right? The bride of Christ or whatever. But we conflate that because of the way we use these words with these entities. And I do think that's something we need. It's hard to distinguish, but important. But like to recognize that that thing exists as a subset or as a tool in the toolbox for the
Yeah.
mission,
Yeah.
which when I hear you say that is like moving into that kingdom age really resonates, obviously. And I think calls back to the thing you said in the beginning, which I thought was pretty insightful, was like they're saying things like even people that would have hated what we were saying 14 years ago are saying those things today. Because and you're like,
From
but
a
it's a
deduction
right,
paradigm.
correct. That's what I was gonna say. Like it's like not it's not revelation, it's not insight, it's not foresight, it's just a reasonable conclusion from observing what's going on. So like if it's repeated enough times over time, so it's like late adopter in a way, right? And so you go, okay,
Exactly.
cool. Like eventually everyone's gonna come around to this conclusion or you can say the same thing about, I mean, let's just say something like a Bitcoin, right? It's just like there's at some point there's like the early adopters, you guys are crazy, what is that? And then eventually you're like, everything's going to move over, like but whatever it is, you don't need to map to that illustration, but there's a lot of examples of like early adopter and like the way that actually kind of works. And so what is the function, what is the role, and we talk about all the time the prophetic and the apostolic, like is at, for many of us, there's almost a condition, which is having, call it a gift or a curse or whatever, but like to be able to see uh, around the corner, right?
Way way more a curse than a gift, but
Okay,
yeah, keep
so
going.
like I feel like I just for myself, I got kind of a point of clarity on why I was feeling so much angst about these emerging forms, which are kind of the same forms,
Mhm.
is almost all of them were trying to help the individual person find God.
Mhm.
So it was almost like a self-help type of we're trying to help these individuals, young professionals in this part of LA or the one group that really was working in the rougher areas. Obviously there was more synergy, at least because they were working in that context. But thousands of college kids.
Mhm.
I we were talking about the point of like in our modern day church planting framework from church growth movement on 70s, 80s, 90s, you can almost make a historical point that almost all church planting in America was for non-impoverished areas because we said to planters, you've got 3 years of funding,
Yep.
you need to be self-sustaining. So most went to the suburbs. Okay. Most went to where they know they can get the money to come in and we can be sustaining. So if you take all that, and most people I think would agree that that was the case, you could almost say that the modern day church planting movement was almost dead set against the primary mode that Jesus brought the gospel in for,
Mhm.
which was for the lowly and the hurting. And
Yeah.
that's the part where I just
Yeah,
go,
talk
it's
about that.
starting getting hard to square that if we reach 10,000 college kids that can afford college, that somehow we're getting onto something different or back to the ancient prophetic call. And even within poor areas, if we're just trying to get people saved, are we still not? We're just trying to help that one individual get his life together. But if the whole movement of what's going on in that city isn't for the ones that are struggling the most, I still wonder if we're getting
What were
anywhere.
you about to
So
say,
Well,
John?
I have a couple thoughts and they're bouncing around, so let me try to connect them. But
Yeah, mine are
so
maybe
too.
I'm just cranky
our
today.
our buddy
Doesn't
Joel,
sound, I mean, this doesn't sound like crankiness. So I think sometimes you jokingly uh, equate propheticness with crankiness, but
Oh,
this is an important thought.
I think all this is really, it's just, it's important to process, right? It's just like, look, we're figuring this out and like trying to figure out, can we be helpful? Can something be done here? Like whatever. So, I'm our buddy Joel. I was looking at his Instagram stories the other day, right? This will connect, somehow. But there was some Sunday morning or Sunday, maybe a few weeks ago, and apparently he just like went on tour to like maybe their partner churches or something like that. But it was like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna get these off, but it was like a Latino church and then a
Yeah, he does
Nigerian
this a
church.
lot with his role with the CMA. Yep.
Okay, yep. So he hit, and they were clearly different contexts, right?
Yeah.
Clearly different cultural context, I mean, they're in the area, but geographic context, demographic for sure. And I just was clicking through that, and he just had like a little like scan of the room video on from each gathering for that day, which I thought was kind of cool. But one of the things that really stood out to me, was, isn't it interesting how they look identical? Like, they like stand, sing these songs, do this thing, like the layout of the room. Like it was just really an interesting thing where the form was identical, the context was entirely different, the demographic was entirely different. And I had just come back. I went and visited those Praxis folks over in Ireland, and had a very similar thought where I was like, you gather, you sing like there's like it's like this form has mapped everywhere. It's what you do. So to your point, like even if you're doing this like the individual salvation thing, and you're doing it even in the context of the poor, the abandoned parts of town or whatever, you're like, are we still oriented around the individual, but then also this form, this thing that we're doing? And the question I have, and like to your point of like, but why are we trying to like protect this thing or not critique this thing that has not the tool that isn't working for the job that needs to get done, right? In some sense of like kingdom. Um and so like we're installing these same forms. Okay, I want to map over to what you were saying about the suburbs. Hopefully I can connect this. So this what stood out to me, because I think you're right about the what we've modeled after. This is both a commitment to this form, but then also a business model that says these have to be done in places of
Affluence.
affluence, right? That's right. And then they get built around consumerism or
Yeah.
comfort, or
Have to. You
they
have
have
to.
to, because
It's not that you don't have an option.
you got to put a little coffee shop in there, and it's got to be dope and have a kids program and all this stuff. But what's
Oh,
interesting
and
is
add this, because I was talking about this morning, and still just under 80% of them fail, if not more. Shut down, go out of business. So keep
correct.
going.
So but in the, as I was thinking about the whole like prophetic insight, foresight thing, what's interesting is that came back to me as you were talking about going to the suburbs, because actually, at least every city I paid attention to, the process of suburbanization is just like moving out from the center of the city. Like, oh, these houses are old, let's build the new houses. And so you can kind of see the concentric circles that go out in what is the process of suburbanization, which back in the day created inner city. And but when you look at those churches, actually, like what was interesting to me is they actually, like a foresight type thing, but for a different aim, they built out ahead of the suburbs. Like they're actually more town and country, and then suburbs develop around them. Like because the land was cheaper, they almost led the way.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was worth like pointing out, like there was like a foresight role in that, but maybe for a different aim, like moving markets or something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. I just want to know
There,
what we're really, what is our angst? Like, because again, you go, none of that's really going to change much. People are still going to call people to certain forms, and they're going to go, I'm excited about doing that. And
I think the angst is the poor. I think there's something inside of us. If you start unpacking the kind of the tower of I this stupid image, but I see a Jenga tower, but whatever. If you start like unpacking all of this angst, when you get to the bottom of it, you realize what we've been watching for it. I'm only 43, so I don't have a ton of experience, but let's say for 30 years is we've been watching a kind of collective agreed upon movement that by necessity has more and more and more pushed the church away from, like, no shade on this guy at all, because I could feel his passion and I appreciated it. But the fact that this brother said one of the most unconsidered demographic, I'm messing up his phrasing, but he said one of the most unconsidered demographic in our country are college students, was when I had to get up and leave.
Right.
That's just not true. That's just so categorically and provably not true. The most unconsidered demographic
Forever,
are
since the beginning of
Forever,
are
time.
the
right.
poor,
Yeah.
are those in poverty, the marginalized. In our country, it tends to be the rural and the urban poor.
Mm-hmm.
And so that at the end of the day, when we talk about kingdom ecosystem, I think the secret sauce is we see repentance. So John, I want to end with this because this is a thought that I'm really like wading in right now. But we see repentance as an invitation back to the Father's house. The prodigal son, because of decisions made from him or his generation, has found himself in the pig trough, unsure fully of how he got there. The good news is come back into the city of God and find refuge. But if the city of God is a really cool or innovative or trendy space, or honestly, I don't want to go too hard in on anything, but out inaccessibly out in the more affluent parts of the city, then what story are we reproducing? And this is why we
Well,
say, as the righteous prosper, the city rejoices. It's the poor.
Yeah.
Jesus came to bring good news to the poor. Go ahead.
so if these people listen to us, they could obviously this might go public.
I hope not.
I know, but they might go, so okay, fine, guys. So we're supposed to tell everybody that it's not just about them accepting their own personal relationship with the Father, but we're supposed to all dive into this thing with the poor. Like, are you kidding? Like every single person has to go work with the poor. That would be the critique of our angst, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I think I would say
Yes.
maybe,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
probably.
so if you want to be, that's the thing. And that's what I've been thinking this whole conversation is, oh, I remember this now. Like I remember that Jesus said, if you want to be a part of this story, then death and crucifixion is necessary.
Mm-hmm.
That means whatever you wanted, whatever your like life's dreams were, dead.
Mm-hmm.
It's about this story. Now, if you want like everything that kind of makes your flesh come to life or whatever, however you want to phrase it, and go to church and have a personal relationship, I tend to think pretty confidently that the Spirit of God would say, that's okay.
Yeah.
Grace to you. You have that. Your reward will be that life, and you're not cursed or anything like that. But the calling of Brave Cities, and this is to me what makes any of these messages so undesirable is they're just for the missionary. They're for the ones who go, no, 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 I want to give everything for this story. The story is the treasure in the field to me.
Mm-hmm.
And we go, oh, okay, well then we got some good news and some bad news.
Well, I did have a friend that did high impact evangelistic type of ministry, and he did read Brave City, and he said, "Look, I view what I do as entry level." So he goes, "Those people are never going to hear your guys' call until they have the Spirit of God in them. I'm just trying to get them personally connected to God so that they can hear the call to the kingdom. You guys are calling people to the kingdom." He goes, "I can't," he literally said, "I can't call people to the kingdom from the pulpit." He goes, "I can call them to God, and then maybe other cats like you call them to the kingdom." So maybe there is like some progression of maybe church growth era, consumerism. Maybe that was helpful in getting people to look to God instead of just themselves, and maybe a prophetic
Yeah.
word dives them. So that literally could be the economy of how God does this thing. That's why no judgment on
Right.
any of this, but we have a hard time not at least critiquing even for ourselves, because I critique what we do all the time. Like, yeah, we're not at it yet. Like,
Sure.
so I hope if this does go public that people recognize that this is not a, hey, our way is better or these other ways are just a waste of time or money. We're really trying to critique the reality that we've been doing all that same stuff for so long, and it just doesn't seem to be catching the allure of the world. And so we do want to prophetically push. Maybe there is more that we can do than just personal evangelism.
So, I had this thought the other day. I was talking with like some church folks, and I didn't do this exercise. I wasn't being asked, and like so that's kind of a thing. So I just was listening, and they were talking through kind of ideas like new forms, experiments, thing, right? It was like wrestling with these ideas, and the whole time I was thinking, and I maybe we've talked about this, I don't know, but I just thought, man, I wonder if this would be a good exercise to do with a community. And if you're listening, maybe try this. Let us know if this is a good exercise. But I thought, like, all right, let's get a whiteboard and go, hey, community, church community, let's list everything we do, right? So they're like, we get together on Sundays, we sing songs, we give, we do that picnic in the park on whatever we do, just list it. Like we list everything that we do. And then just ask the question, what if we can't do any, like, if you just go for the sake of this thought experiment, we are no longer allowed to do one of those things. So, and I just wonder what it would open up, because what all of those things are is verbs, like activities, actions, like investments or something like that. And so if you said, okay, we have to iterate now with kingdom values, with the ethos, the mission of God, the call on us, and to go, we have to do this. We have to stay faithful to the call of God on our lives. And now we just made a list of all the things we're not allowed to do. How do you guys think that might actually go? Do you think, my hunch is, I don't know, like actually, but when I was thinking about it, I'm like, wouldn't that open up like the necessity of innovation? Like
Well, I mean, that's our personal story with our family. Because of Ryan's
right,
epilepsy,
right.
fucking, we had to go, oh, we can't drive to a building. So we'll just fix, so for sure it drives to innovation. And
Well,
if you,
that's why uh, you know, ages of persecution have always created the most mission.
for sure, it is like this might be something that we just have to recognize for us and how we communicate.
Mm,
That the predominant model of church really is to try to get people to know about the king. The primary way that we come out of the gates is primarily to model the kingdom. And then as people experience the kingdom, we tell them about the king along the way, where many still predominant, like, and that would be our method of church planting. You go do kingdom, you live kingdom, you enjoy it, you uncover it for people, and then you tell them about the king along the way. Most other church planting forms have been just, we're coming right out of the gate to tell you about the king. And hopefully someday you'll do some of this kingdom stuff.
it's funny because there's this interesting. So you like talking like, I don't know, what comes to mind is like word and deed or something like that, like action culture versus like pronouncement or something. And like
Yep, I'm with
the
you.
reality is they're both important, right?
Totally.
And because like my actions, so my actions are what give meaning to my words. My words without the work seem empty, hollow, trite. I think, right? But my action is what gives meaning to my words. But my words give explanation or definition of my action. So like, and so it's like, what you're saying is like, what do you lead with? And I think you're right. I don't think it maybe needs to be right and wrong, much as like, I don't
Just
know,
order.
we'll just do
Yeah.
this. Like,
And
and
we did talk a lot about this in that little hour we had. We did talk about Luke 10, the progression of bringing peace into the city first, and we made some comments later that yeah, this brave city ideology is really it's bigger bang for the buck with the poor for sure. It's not like you can't. One guy did ask, "Have you ever seen this in a well-to-do area?" And I gave an example. Yeah, yeah. So you can see this happen,
Mhm.
but there's bigger bang for the buck with
Yeah,
people
for
that don't
sure.
have the bucks for sure. So I think we did communicate that. I think we got across that we're really talking about order of priority as specifically related to church planting because you're going in specifically to establish something that's not there, whatever that is. So maybe we're over the target zone on the progression. For sure, not judging. Like, man, we hope everybody talks about the king to everybody. But we have been doing that for a long time, and that somehow has left a massive vacuum of curiosity and inspiration for the world. So, but when you lead out with the kingdom, it just doesn't have the fanfare for sure. And you don't need a billion. You can do the kingdom with zero. So we think
Yep.
that's an opportunity for people. You don't have to quit your job to do kingdom. You can keep your job.
Yep.